Hi, my name's Heather Roberge. I have the colossal task of introducing a dear colleague for tonight's lecture. Neil M. Denari, FAIA, joined UCLA Architecture and Urban Design nearly 20 years ago. He is principal of NMDA, Neil M. Denari Architects Inc. The past 2 decades have been extraordinarily impactful and productive for Neil. Most recently, he released the book Mass X, Precise Form for an Imprecise World, a chronicle, and I use that word very purposefully, a chronicle of work, or in his words, things, from 2000 to 2017. Last year, Neil received the AIALA Educator of the Year Award. In 2015, he was elected to the College of Fellows of the AIA. In 2011, he was awarded AIALA's Gold Medal, and he has been the recipient of countless design awards. Neil's practice has grown as he has been awarded projects abroad and increasingly here in Los Angeles. His current projects are coming to a neighborhood near you. You'll soon find his recent obsessions in Hollywood, West Hollywood, Mid-City, and Beverly Hills. His new book, which you'll have a chance to see in the back if you don't already own a copy, has many recurring references to vision, which is a subject dear to my heart. He speaks about sight, framing, the window, both as a literal element and as a desktop or mobile portal through which to view. I've used this as an excuse to write a few thoughts about Neil's work to share with you as an introduction. Neil's work oscillates between an interest in elevation and surface flatness on the one hand, and an interest in mass and surface continuity on the other. As someone classically trained in drawing, Neil's work reminds me of the three-quarter view. The three-quarter view is a representation of a figure posed somewhere between front and profile views. It's a view that maintains the features of both elevation and mass, a mode of portraiture that makes visual assurances about a silhouette as mass. In this view, it's impossible to hide awkward or uncoordinated features. Tone and shadow never belie the factual sculpting of form. The three-quarter view is one in which profiles and proportions are laid bare and multiple alternative fields of view are previewed. A sharp architectural critic might ask, how does the three-quarter view differ from the isometric drawing? An isometric drawing is largely removed from the specificity of point of view. Its site is imagined. It's an abstraction, a field of view of the mind. The three-quarter view, on the other hand, enacts point of view. A visit to HL 23 reveals the role of the three-quarter view in Neil's design process. As Highline and Street Grid orient its passers-by, HL 23 is an experienced model, expertly posing for the human cameras underfoot. As Neil's work increases in scale and organizational complexity, the three-quarter view has multiplied, changing scale to facilitate a confident choreography of utterly flawless parts. These parts, balconies, iterant corners, etc., emerge from rippling surfaces only to quickly cohere again as building mass. This enacting of point of view is an act of generosity that mirrors Neil's collegial approach here at UCLA, and I suspect in his office as well. Neil has unwavering respect for alternative points of view. In this regard, unlike his steadfast design sensibility, Neil quite literally makes space for others, his students, his colleagues, his readers, and the occupants of his architecture and the city in which his architecture resides. Precise, flawless, beautifully conceived and detailed, exceptionally confident. We can only hope to live amongst more of Neil Denari's work. Please join me in offering a warm welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Heather, for that touching talk. Thank you all for coming. What's the score of the game? Who's concerned about the game? Is my voice okay back there? Okay, great. We got that all sorted out today. And can I get the lights, please? We'll go straight away. I have 2 talks. It doesn't mean 2 hours. It still means 1 hour. So don't worry about that. So 2 talks compressed. They overlap somewhere in the middle. And the first one's about urban orthographics. At least for the last 10 years or so, once we emerged from the world of interiors to do building projects, we found our projects only located in cities, only located on incredibly constrained sites. Never done a project in a forest, never done a project on a rolling plain, never done a project anywhere other than somebody's looking right at you in the urban forest. And so the orthographic, because more and more, not only does the city and the Cartesian grid operate on most cities, but it's also coursing through almost everything that I do now. And I have to say that after drawing continuous surfaces and airbrushing blobs in the 80s and 90s with a phobia for the idea of the grid as being a reference to either A, a conservative project, or B, a merely intellectual one. If I say merely intellectual, as though it had no anarchy built into it. And so in a way, I'd like to say I've appropriated both the order and the anarchy of the idea of the grid. And maybe at the end, this is really about the project, which is connected to the urban grid. So that's really lecture number 2. Lecture number 1 is about the book Mass X. We have to think about this project as being one that's the same as a building itself. It took longer, or as long as most buildings that I'm doing now, weighs about as much, and at some level had the same, or if not more, commitment to a project. Jeff Chin and Lillian Zeinel-Zadegan have been working with me for 10 years, and there are many, many others whose work is in this book. Hundreds of people have worked in my office over the years, and it's to them that the book exists. There's a lot of UCLA going on. Linda Hart, is Linda here? There she is. Linda's a PhD from UCLA, and she was my editor on the project. Kara Moore, who graduated a few years ago, who's up in Seattle, she project managed it. I should say something about Linda, who helped me write this book. I wrote it many, many times over the years, pressed delete many, many times. And the one thing that, among, I would say, hundreds of things that she helped me with, you know how when you write a text and the project attempts to do something, right? This idea attempts to, et cetera, or perhaps the project, and every time I'd write that, she wrote back and said, can't we just say that it happened? Can't we take out, perhaps, can't we take out the idea, the suggestion of the project, and just say it? And so, thank you for not only that, Linda, but so many other things. And Heather, thank you for supporting the project by I think not only helping to sell it out, there's only 900 copies and there's a few here tonight, but it really is a project about AUD at some level. And Bruce Land is the publisher. Bruce, a lot of us have done books with Bruce. He loves LA architects. Nobody's ever met him, only on email. He's out in the ether in the wilderness in Beijing. And every day I went to the office, I kept thinking he's going to send me an email saying, Neil, we got to stop the project. But he never did. So here's a quote from Leotard in 1998 about there'll be no books. So maybe the students in the audience can verify that there are no books. There might not be any books. Or if there are books, then the issue of the importance of the book relative to digital media, of course, is in question. I'm not sure if you gain time by not reading because you're reading or looking at something else, so time is expended. But if you look at this quote and you say there are no more books, then anybody who does a book says, I'll just do a book anyway. So let's just do books. To confront a book of this size, on the one hand, was only a question of elapsing of time. It's a big object. Somebody would say to me, the giant mega book is dead. This is a dinosaur project, and my comeback is I didn't publish a book for 20 years. So this is like 20 years worth of books. If I released a small book every year, it'd probably be bigger than this. And so it is a confrontation. Imagine, sitting down, no computer, just a desk, confronting, printed matter. And that was scary even for me to think about to start the project. This is a still from Contempt by Jean-Luc Godard, and the opening, this is from 1963. The opening is his kind of classic way in which he would talk about cinema within the format of cinema. So to talk about a book within the format of a lecture is almost similar, which is to talk about its making as though that making had the same kind of content that was in the book. Since we're on Godard, we're going to start on color and the colors of the book, and to a certain extent what color might, how color might operate in my work. And those of you who do know my work at some level know that it's relatively promiscuous and provocative at some particular level. So we have a cyan, a white, and an orange-red as the primary colors of the book. And it comes directly from a few sources. And maybe even some of you know these things because I've lectured over the years on this. This is the film title, part of the sequence of Godard's movie Weekend. He made about 8 or 9 or 10 movies in the 1960s, all of which were exploring the question essentially of politics and the structure of film. At some level, he was both embracing and wanted to kill Hollywood movies all at the same time as having no real critical vision. He was obsessed with red, white, and blue, and it coursed through all his movies, both in terms of the graphic design of the film titles, but also in all aspects of the art direction of the films. Here's still in the early scenes of Weekend. Weekend, by the way, is a movie that excoriates consumer culture, which of course was on the rise in the 1960s, and especially as was seen from the position of the, let's call him a French intellectual at some particular level, a shift of the position of French intellectual culture relative to global consumer culture. But here the two automobiles strategically played out, the roof even painted white, not blue, to make sure all three colors are in there. 2 or 3 things I know about are actually a year before you watch this film, it's almost every scene is completely art directed and completely and strategically related, in this particular case, almost to the letter of blue, white, and red of national colors. And here it is in the car, the blue sweater. and the blue overalls framing the red car. And he was interested in playing with the identity of France in relation to the identity of the United States. It wasn't that he was being nationalistic and saying, you know, French culture was somehow better than American culture. In fact, he was critical essentially of both all at the same time, as he represented a kind of worker Marxist ideology on the one hand. Yet we know that through the flag, colors designate forms of identity. Of course, the colors here are slightly different, but rather the same. 50 stars is different than 3 strident colors of blocks on a flag. They suggest you know, different things, but at the same time they're politically there's a political dimension to them, and that was interesting for me because I researched all the flags of the 196 countries, and 46% use red, white, and blue. So in fact, that color system begs to be the global color system, even though something like green and yellow are more manifest in Africa. Now, I talk about these colors in a way to paint a picture a little bit of both the possibility and the problem of doing this book, Mass X, and how one would channel obsessions into a project and where would they go. I had some curiosity about why Kubrick, at the end of 2001, when Bowman goes into this strange room and he watches himself turn from who he is to an old man and then ultimately to a child as connected to the Stargate sequence. And I wondered why these colors. There must be something underneath it. Those are the colors of the Gulf Oil Corporation branding. Gulf Oil in the 1960s supported and sponsored all of the NASA and space race television and commercials on TV. I was a little kid, but I remember all of that. And in fact, they gave out in their gasoline stations these pop-ups of the lunar module, which I had one. I wish I still had it. I didn't know what was so deeply imbued inside it. And I was convinced that this was a curious, uncredited product placement. Kubrick actually got 40 companies to offer product placement as a way to aid the budget. He was a clever businessman. Here are just a few, and if you've ever seen that movie, you'll see these things pop up, yet they're so completely connected to the art direction, it might not even offend you on the one hand that these commercial enterprises are deeply embedded in this work of art. And I researched and I called producers and production assistants and I said, was there anything to do with Gulf Oil? And they told me no, and of course it wasn't in the credits. And so my theory just had to be a conspiracy theory. I was still convinced that Kubrick got Gulf Oil to sponsor the film, but Gulf Oil didn't want to, at the same time, be related to the movie itself. In 1971, 3 years later, Gulf sponsored Le Mans racing in the 69-70 season, and Steve McQueen made a movie of the 1970 race. He didn't drive in it, at least in the movie. And Lee Katzin directed it, and this is the same kind of movie as 2001. It's 2 hours and 40 minutes long, and there's no dialogue. So the same colors cropped up again, the same kind of movie cropped up again, the same type of formalism cropped up again, and I was sure that Katzin and Kubrick spoke, and that Gulf had told Lee Katzin, you need to make a movie that's the same kind of movie to connect A Space Odyssey to Le Mans. That was the conspiracy, and all of those things kind of fomenting on my mind were, in a way, I'm being facetious. I knew that they weren't real, but it was a way to artificially make connections, which I guess were personal at some particular level, that had politics and meaning. But at the end of the day, and I hope this reference kind of messes you up a little bit, these two colors just look good on TV. And that's all it was. And so the idea that colors could connect to a political regime, a nationalist identity on the one hand, or an oil company at the same time emptied out of all of those meanings in this particularly strange use of the colors, but it was the time. Now, I thought that that was a strange kind of connection to make, but did you know that there's something called the orange and teal look, and it's in every blockbuster movie, and there are tutorials online that show you how to get this. And so when I saw this, I thought, you know what, this doesn't seem too weird, because there's something about visual culture and complementary colors, quite simply, that operate at every particular level. It's the product of an overactive imagination, and what I was imagining on the one hand was both deeply trivial, and this is a point at which I would say, who cares? Who cares about this little obsession of you making these color references? Who cares that no one's ever juxtaposed these two images before? Who cares? What difference does it make? And that was really both the opportunity and the problem of the book. And here's a title from Weekend and Godard. This is translated as A Film Adrift in the Cosmos. He later also says it's a film found in a dump. I didn't go that far to think that I'd find the book in a dump, but I was thinking that the book is really adrift. If I'm going to tell stories about color in obscure ways with obscure references, however clever and however formal they were, I'd have to ask myself, who would read it? Who would care? And in fact, if you make a book today, it's a pretty special thing, and you wouldn't make it in a way where no one would read it. So I had to try to find, what did it mean to exist in this ether or this cosmos? And so the cosmos, the feeling adrift and all of that, where the work is and where it's going, it was simply the way to co-opt that possibility and, of course, turn it into architecture, which is how the name comes about. So mass times, mass multiplied by, that's the idea of the project. And it's a pretty simple thought that mass is the particular domain at a particularly large scale for architecture. Of course, we know sculpture and other forms of art and production, have that. At the top is ideas, and so without an idea, you don't have a building. At the bottom is yes. With no yes, you have no building. So somewhere between yes and ideas, here are all the questions and problems. This is nothing no one knows. You guys know all this. And I suppose it equals architecture, and architecture's got its own coloration, and it's got its own ideas and possibilities connected to it. But when you think about dreams, land, greed, materials, luck, miracles, all of that, everybody who's made a project knows that there's at least 5 or 6 of these things coursing through every project. And this is, on the one hand, not a theoretical position. This is just a description of the idea of the kind of panorama of possibilities of formulas in producing architecture. Now, I knew the project was going to be pretty large. It started out as 600 pages, and then I, in fact, got greedy and kept asking for more pages, and eventually got it up to 1,000. And that's a bit like having a band and having T-shirts but no songs. It's like I wanted more pages. I didn't know what I was going to put in it. Kind of just a glutton for the idea that a 1,000-page book, is good or necessary. We split the difference around 775, 800. And the idea was that the book would also incorporate every possible genre that was relevant to essentially kill the monograph. We're all trying to kill the monograph. It seems like a dead enterprise. It seems like a commercial venture, etc. And so by killing it, of course, it meant surrounding it and kind of multiplying, calling it a multigraph, the possibility of a new genre book. I don't know if I was successful in that, but at some level, that's what the idea was. Nothing would be off limits. Nothing would be out of the realm of, let's say, identity of type. So if you see a photograph like this, which we typically associate, let's say, with a coffee table book. This is a simulation of a spread in the book. A coffee table image. Now, I don't say this coffee table image or art monograph image from, well, I'm juxtaposing coffee table with art monograph. This is a photograph by Benny Chan, a one-point perspective, completely beautiful shot, the way in which you would ask somebody to document a project, and here it is as a spread. There's no text on the page, etc. So it tries to co-opt what would typically be the straightforward presentation through photography of projects. Now, there's not a huge amount of built work in the book, so it's never going to take on the idea that it's just a saturated, unconscious presentation of these kind of mega images. That project, by the way, this is a spread also from the book, asks questions about the temperature of design. This building called 20th sells mid-century furniture and modern furniture, and the questions for me a lot come around the era of late modernism, around the late 60s to early 70s, and asking on the left if Paco Rabanne's repetitive brass dress as a hot version of essentially cold repetition in relation to the organizational rigidity of the astronaut's mind and the astronaut's technologically laden piece of fashion gear, as it were. And if you see a drawing like this, and these two are drawings that we make as architects, so when you juxtapose the kind of sublime elevational image of the finished building with nerdy drawings with meaningless numbers, you get the idea of something like a science journal where you're either going to look deeply into it or your eyes are going to glaze over and move on. Depends on who you are and what your interests are. So the object, thinking about this idea of making a book in an era in which people don't make books, that's not really come true, at some particular level. But if you look at the bottom to start with, censorship high. Over 9 years I worked on this project. I censored most of the material to the public, and almost 70% of the material that you see in the book was never seen before over the course of 9 years. Now, that's professional suicide at one level. But I knew that the book was going to be big and expensive, and why would I publish a mausoleum? Why would I publish a book that would be dead? Why would I publish a book that you could access in other places? And so on the one hand, it plays into two particular points. There's a print run of only 900. It's already a rare book. It costs a lot of money. It starts to become marginal. It starts to become very extreme. And of course, it's the only place where if you happen to be interested in this work, it's only here. Now, I did that purposefully because I don't know any other situation in the world of access and in the world of digital access that would be the case. So on the one hand, as a weird thing, it was a justification for doing the book this way, but it also exiled it in a funny way all at the same time. I worked on it for 9 years off and on. There are the weights and thicknesses. One reason why the book is also as big as it is, and I should say that this this book is going back to talk about the publisher. When we were making our deal, here was the deal. You know, we made the agreement on pages, and I said, you give me books at the end, and of course you'll give me no fee, and in exchange for no fee, I want 100% creative control. Absolutely no problem, he said. And so it was a project done with no interference at all. And there's very few projects of any kind today where the only interference would be your overactive imagination. And the other thing, though, on a pragmatic level is all the images and drawings are very large. And so if you were doing a book with a publisher who'd say squeeze it all into half the size, you'd get drawings that would be this big, which would lead to the book being really a mausoleum, i.e. you wouldn't be able to study it. So here you can actually study the line weights, you can look at the information. So here's a plan that takes an entire page and, you know, 2 images on the facing page. So everything is big. It's sort of like using big fonts to write a text. But that's the only way in which I could imagine making the book that way. Style. The hated word style. People who know me know I love the word style. Style is only the coherent set of elements in a language. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with style to understand it as a coherent set of elements? It's not the same as fashion, as we know. So I've always been interested in style, and I've always been interested in the way in which graphic style sends messages. There's 2 fonts, Steinhardt and Melior. Melior classic font from the 1960s. Got to be left justified. Lots of rules, break the rules and then they become rules. A late modernist world, one idea. If you know me, I only like one chord. Let it ring out. That's what this is in terms of style. And there's the person who taught me what this is. This is Wim Krauw, who recently passed away, sadly. He was a friend of mine, and I took a pilgrimage to see him in 2005 before I started the book. I was really like a stalking fan, and we ended up spending 4 days in Amsterdam before we continued a friendship after that, because I was really interested in this new alphabet that you see on the right-hand page, which was a perverse conceptual idea about the problematics of how serif fonts would get pixelated on early digital screens on CRTs, and he invented this gridded, deeply Cartesian font called the new alphabet. That, of course, is itself illegible at some particular level, but relative to the pixels, it was always going to be clean, even more than the dot matrix. So he made this as a conceptual project to fix a problem that only created more problems, which of course is at the heart, I think, of his work, which is about the curious relationship between, you know, formalism and a certain kind of dedicated modernist function. It was worrisome to sit down and also design a book on my own. I, for better or worse, I designed the entire thing. I designed it page by page. I wrote it in InDesign. I designed it in InDesign, and essentially built it and thought through it only in InDesign and never touched Word at all. And that was worrisome, but at some level I'd convinced myself I was a good enough graphic designer to undertake a project like this competition for Peach Airlines. It's a Japanese low-cost airline that we ended up winning a competition for in 2010, and this was realized in 2011. And so thinking about the ways in which graphic design, pure graphic design, didn't obviously design the plane, in which pure graphic design, we're going to send messages and essentially write a program. In this particular case, the brief was about youth and fun. And not only did we research the fact that magenta was the least used of the color ways in low-cost airlines, it also connected to the colors of the momo, the peach, the Japanese fruit that is a connection to youth. So what did we want to say with this? The one thing that we wanted to say is we didn't want to make the plane look fast, because planes historically had always looked fast. Stripes along the windows. There's no line that agrees to the orientation of the plane. We wanted it to look a little bit slower, on the one hand, floral to a certain extent, let's say, and send other kinds of messages that were supposed to be directly related, of course, to the company and to the brief. So I think I gained enough confidence to do graphic design in this book, and I guess my goal was to make it good enough where professional graphic designers wouldn't laugh at me. I think that was my modest ambition. What's the mode? The mode, after all kinds of investigations into how the projects would lay out, it finally always came back to the idea of chronology. 50 projects, a nice convenient round number. Built, unbuilt, competition, photos, diagrams, maps, etc. Zeitgeist, the time. Started the book in 2009. 2008 had just happened, the collapse. So in 2013, after thinking about this quite a bit, I wrote a text on the post-2008 icon. But thinking about doing this book during this time was really, I think it had a lot of influence on what I was thinking, what I was up to. I read very little architectural text during the last 10 years, and read authors that I could learn how to write from, because I didn't know how to write before writing this book. And that was the other thing. Others came, at the beginning and said, it's the age of the tweet, you shouldn't do it. It's the age of the tweet, just write your captions. And I thought, okay, that's really kind of like let's say a readerly text, which would be nice and easy kind of reading. And I was interested in the writerly text, but of course the writerly text begins with one's own interest on the one hand. These are the writers that I read quite a bit, both essayists and novelists, to try to learn how to write. Even Pauline Kael, the late, great film critic for the New York Times, I went back into the archives and read her stuff, which was really amazing on reviews of films. Rebecca Solnit, really one of the kind of contemporary powerhouses, I think, of the contemporary essay, and also the critic, I believe, of the legacy of Godard, really today at some particular level. The book starts in 2000 with Y2K Paranoia. We did a weird time capsule competition. I think others did as well. Ticking clocks and black, inert, odd figures starts out the book. But 9/11 happens a year later, and that trauma is crazy bad. More fear even after we've overcome the fear of turning into 2000. And as you know, the landscape shifted, especially in major cities after 2001. And so projects came into the office that, looking back on them now, I had no idea how curious they were. One in 2004 for the Endeavor Agency. Read this quote by Tom Strickler when asked for him what the most important thing about the design for the office was, not caring if anyone liked it. So we were in an era in which, these agents were just kind of making a punk move here. Like, it doesn't matter if anybody likes this. Let's just go build the project. And that was a kind of odd possibility where I said, okay, we'll get all the wastebaskets in the right place. We'll get all the offices in the right place. We'll get all the IT hooked up, and we'll solve all your problems, and that'll be easy. And then what? And then we make a meditation on the idea of the alienation effect of space, connected to the distancing effect in theater by Bertolt Brecht. Couldn't be more obscure. I thought it was kind of clever to connect the idea of theater to this talent agency, which produces not content, but people who make content, drawing a thread between those. But in reality, the geometry of the project relative to the way in which you circulated through the space was about these kinds of sheets of time and cutting sections and constantly being outside of the space and always looking at it as though it was a projection that you could never go into, a series of thresholds. And in fact, for my client, I actually told these particular stories. He said, great, no one will get it. It's perfect. No one will like it. Let's just go build it. And I'm pretty sure that everybody enjoyed working in it, but I don't think that they had to like it. So at some particular level, this was an odd time, or when a family came with a branding mission, a beautiful text about how they wanted to live their lives, but certainly not connected to the typical modes of domestic architecture. They didn't want any wood in their house, the Allen Vu family. We don't want to have any wood. We don't want a fireplace. We just want places for our devices. We want to be able to float in the ether of the digital. Can you materialize that for us? That was a particular type of time. But there were also politics as well. BBM, which is a pretty radical, I would say, activist group in Berlin, commissioned NMDA to make a project for a mobile theater that would debut in Stuttgart. On the left is a confrontation in 1968, the Tegelweg confrontation. So this project was about the idea, funded by the EU, by the way, about the idea that when you have protest, disciplining devices and agents like tasers and rubber bullets and so forth are really devices of the state apparatus to control. And this project was about the exploration, again, within the footprint of the critical community that they were asking questions of, about whether there was a certain sense of freedom and space in the nature of protest, connecting to Habermas's ideas of open society and transparent communication. And so there were projects also loaded at some level with a particular type of politics, which I found compelling. So back to the reader. Who's reading the project that I'm working on? It can't be so internalized that my own enjoyment would be the motivator for the project. But let's not talk about the book, really, because maybe we're starting to shift away from the idea of the book to the nature of architecture. And so audience, there is the audience for the book, but there's also more particular our architecture audience. And there's a big space between a few friends that you show stuff to, that you talk about in our specialized language, and the world of public opinion. And public opinion, of course, is the thing that you have at times the ability to persuade, but mostly you don't. Architecture is a popular discourse, not necessarily a populist discourse. Even among people who aren't necessarily deeply interested in architecture. This project in 1960 by Nathalie Deblois, most people don't know that she was one of the main partners in SOM at the time. She designed this amazing high modern project in Park Avenue and 53rd Street in New York for Pepsi. A straight, clean single bay with two cantilevered bays, gossamer light, aluminum spandrels, nothing more, nothing less. And yet it's an interesting kind of infill project, exfill project, because you can see the fire stair is actually pushed back, so we think that the project is detached from the building next door, but it actually laminates itself to the city grid. And, for the high modernists, the city grid and the urban orthographic was given. It was the idea that efficiency on the one hand and the logic of building materials all came together in a way that defined formal languages. And this was not the same in the 1980s when Philip Johnson built essentially what I call a sarcophagus. He actually buried the building on the left and put it into his coffin on the right, at least as long as he was interested in postmodernism. And these were the two kind of curious bookends that I found myself thinking about in New York in making this project in 2012. We finished it. The orthographic aspect of the project is probably pretty clear relative to the grid of the city. The grid of the city, just like the project on Park Avenue, is identifiable. There's the High Line. It runs directly parallel to 10th Avenue, the rest of the street grid, 23rd Street, etc., articulating the world's most well-known orthographic urban life. And yet, this fact that we're not on the end grain of the site, i.e. the corner of the block, we're making a inboard corner. And the fact that we're working into and outside of zoning envelope, we had 7 waivers to allow this project to exist. A year of politics and pushing around. But here's the 3 floors that agree to the upright grid. Let's say the middle 3 with the diagonal bracing articulate both the Cartesian but also the braced aspect of the frame of the project, while the rest of the building anxiously moves around. So we're already thinking about the kind of zebra, the XYZ aspect of architecture, moving away from the purely orthographic. Now, painting or making decals of the structure on the glass is probably closer to the AT&T building in its postmodern rhetoric of reinterpreting or resituating the structure. And that's fine, and we can keep it in the postmodern camp, even though the kind of open frame and the grid, the gossamer light steel and glass building connects back to the SOM project. So its deviance relative to X and Y is pretty clear all around the building, because it very rarely shows itself as being agreeing to the grid through the vectors and the lines of the city, as these kinds of buildings do with all the exposed slabs across the street. And when the building is sliced off in the back, you get a pure cross-section of the one bay, the one thin bay, which agrees to the grid of the city, and then almost nothing else does. Here's where we wanted the book to look like, that magazine, Detail Magazine? We just wanted to look like Detail Magazine. This is for you, Mohammed. Yes. Here's the nice Wyoming landscape through Mises' perspectival upright Cartesian grid, useful in the landscape or in urban situations. And here's our zebrified projects where the Z axis kind of comes in. And of course, it's a complete reflection of the curtain wall agrees to the grid of the city. That's the way in which you would normally build the project. And all of the other anxious sloping aspects are to essentially conform to 2 ambitions. One, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, architectural ambition and real estate ambition, I should say. So if we flipped the SOM project and we looked at the building with the open corner on the left side and combined it with the question of why deep purple, we'd have this project, which is on Wilshire, 9000 Wilshire. It's in Beverly Hills, outside the Triangle. This is 32,000 square foot spec office building. It's a 45-foot height limit. It's an FAR of 2, and that's it. That's it. No interior, no library, no public space, a pure urban piece of real estate hardware. It sounds like a project, that you wouldn't want to do. And all of these projects are commercial projects. In fact, I'm showing almost no interiors in the project because the projects take up their place in the city. Developers build cities, not philanthropists, in the true sense of the word. And so this project, in many respects, asks questions about the word speculate. Developers build floor plates for rent. They put out their ambition for their own sense of ambition for profit and wealth. And what we have in this particular case is not a rethinking of program, but merely the exploration of envelope aesthetics. This is a painting by Richer that describes my words. I can't not do that project. I can't not help build the city. That's the kind of curious way in which we provide a service to help building the density of the city, and then at the same time, the private discourse, as it were, as it's going to play itself out in public, in some respects is all we have, but it's also quite a lot at the same time. Our clients ask for a 100% glass building, and this is mediated by the fact that where there's glass is for uninterrupted views of the landscape and from the city, and that is a direct relation to profitability and rentability. Everything else, they said, you can do what you want. So in a way, all we're doing is exploring everything that's solid in the project around the straightforward deployment of floor space. It's an odd machine. The core is on the corner of the building on one side, big lease space in the front, and at the rear off the alley is the parking garage. The second floor is pushed away with a slot from the party wall building, and that's one of the things that we're doing to try to essentially produce a higher value for the building in the top floor, which is actually a bonus FAR for an event room for the users of the building, with a big terrace on the north that looks to the hills. There you see this section on top. So nothing more than a moment frame, concrete moment frame, parking garage, and the iceberg of parking, and a couple of cantilevers. Here, a 20-foot cantilever made in steel, and otherwise a series of little 10-foot cantilevers in concrete. This project started in 2011, and now there's a new developer called Skanska, and they will start building it this year. So by the time it's done, it's more than 10 years to do the project. I don't feel so bad about the book now, being 9 years. Things just take forever. Why purple? Interesting. I did a black scheme for this project. I did a white scheme. I did a silver scheme. They were all, for one reason or another, all rejected. I had no more modernist colors to work with. And if color was going to make a difference, and it had to be something that I had deep pleasure for, Beverly Hills said, we want great architecture in our city, and we're tired of people like Paris Hilton defining us, and so would you please do a unique and singular building here? I said, it's only an office building. And so making this color is about moving to the opposite end of the spectrum of what one imagines with the flash of Beverly Hills. And this is another idea about what Beverly Hills also imagined themselves or itself as always, which was about status, and in this particular case, using this color as a global recognition of the idea of status and possibly even royalty. Here's an interior within the ground floor of a new office building in West Hollywood. It in itself in a grid, very, very simple. It's a commissary space. The kitchen is packed into one corner. There's a toilet here, and essentially we get a U-shaped space that's arranged around this kind of grid of columns and the corner of the building. So we're already dealing with the heavy relationship of the urban orthographic within the space. Like a lot of projects where plans are incredibly banal, and in a lot of our projects they're either driven by the site or, in this case, driven by the logic of program. Quite often we only have the ceiling to explore, and as I always say, there's no codes related to ceilings. There's no ADA related to ceilings. There's no way in which you can be forced to reinforce the grid. We took our VRF units, which are distributed around the space, used them as points within a circular field, spiraled LED lights around them, and made them embedded into perforated drywall, along with the sectional transition from wall to ceiling. So in a way, this is a kind of meditation on some metaphorical aspects of a kind of nature, a forest and a sky. On the one hand, a buoyant set of clouds. They also refer to, in this particular case, the big ceiling fans that are used often in sound stages. This is a lot where many famous movies have been made over the years. Not too many people in the U.S. had used the perforated drywall. It's all over the place in Europe. It's a fantastic material. And so the whole ceiling is completely made of perforated drywall. You strike a circle around where you want, and then you mud everywhere else, and then you go in and poke out the holes of the pieces of drywall that you don't want in there to make these things. Essentially like making an analog zipatone map that these lights can get embedded into. There's the ceiling plan. So in a way, the grid is still there, but we're making a staggered grid here around the grid of columns, and then the circular forms start to essentially defamiliarize that grid, and then finally the rotation of the lights, which intersect in odd places, really throw the eye off quite a bit. This is not a rendering, this is a photograph. And Benny Chan laboriously photographed the entire space. This is like a gigabyte file. But he's an obsessive photographer, which is why I love working with him. A couple of projects very quickly to go over before I spend a little bit more time on other ones. This is in Santa Monica. This is Arizona. This is 20th. If you live on the west side, the old Kingsley Mortuary, the one that looks like the kind of faux Tudor factwork construction place where Ronald Reagan famously was embalmed. That's what a lot of people on the west side remember. And much to my surprise, after we started this building turns out to be a historic project. It's stucco and plaster and nothing more than that, and an ersatz stylistic rendition. Yet it's a historic building. It's been decreed and won't be torn down. The site is being turned into a wellness center and institute that we're designing. There's a parking lot here with some buildings that will be torn down. This is all one site, and so this building essentially is connecting to this historic building. It's a limestone project, and I would call this our background project. I would call this our Spanish or Portuguese project, the one in which we're trying to make a high level of refinement of the envelope and also a modest level of expression to the project. And all it is essentially dealing with the local contingencies of the grid of the city again, which we see here. It's pretty clear. The building fills out the site here and is completely trimmed relative to the local conditions. Do you know this building? Some of you know it, yeah. 45-foot height limit, 2.0 FAR. This is 65,000 square feet. And when we look at this image, I'm doing my best to think of it like a little plaza in Munich or something like that, where the way in which the new and the old can work together, or I should say in Portugal. Keep my references correct. This project is on Western, about a block below the 10 freeway. This is part of a 6-building master plan that our office has done. I'm not going to show you the master plan. But the master plan also makes a series of gridded blocks into the site for discrete projects. This is an existing building which is being renovated into a hospital that's being renovated into residential units. This is a 60-unit, 60,000 square foot residential building, and there's to the north a hotel, and behind in another phase will be more housing. Overall, it's 575,000 square feet. And so this is, on the one hand, a typical project, a concrete podium and substructure with 4 stories of wood construction. And we have nothing more than the mandate of the building to be a good, straightforward architectural block within the city. And by embossing and modifying units, these units point out to the west, to the east. These point to the north. The other ones point to the south. So in a way, it's a building that looks like a double-loaded corridor, but really it's almost like a center core project. Behind is a walking street that we're developing that will be, most developers are now looking to something like the platform as the paradigm for scale and success. This is a monochromatic seafoam green project, which I think taps into some of the long history of that particular color and its identity relative to nature, relative even to money and economics, and to the irreal nature of color found in nature. And of course, there's a blue corridor and a red corridor. And for my students, you see where the camera is positioned? You looking at that? Great, thank you. Right in the middle. This is a project that we did with a number of architects, with Peter Zellner, who was the design principal at AECOM in 2015. And we were asked in a big multi-building project to do a hotel on the corner of this large block, 15 stories tall. And the formal aspect of the project, which was to both agree again to the nature of the grid of the site, and like we've been exploring in a number of corner projects, agitating the building to be able to move and respond in a kind of free way, not unlike HL23, to the way in which the city would work. Here, overcoated with windows that don't agree to the upright and Cartesian nature of the urban orthographic, because it's a hotel and we weren't worried about the the nature of a permanent market, this is what we were thinking about in terms of the defamiliarization of the grid and the agitation of the grid and the difference within the city. Now, I'm not showing you all the versions of this project, which did have diagonal windows in them, which could not quite stand up to the laws of taste and on the one hand and economy on the other hand. Yet here they are, and like the other projects, everything else starts to articulate very clear differences in relationships between the nature of the urban block. This is on La Brea. We're looking south. We're a block below Santa Monica. And this is a building that, while it looks like it'll be out of scale for the neighborhood, we already know that this site will have a building of equal height. This is going to look completely different in the next 10 or 15 years along La Brea, and this will just simply be the first project to kind of mark out that territory. So on the one hand, it looks like a monument, or it looks like a singular building, not a monument in the dramatic sense of the monument, but that it will ultimately become like an infill project that won't have necessarily retaining walls next to it, but will have its own sense of filling in the city. Now, from that view, it looks like a complete block, and from the south, you see the project. While it's not a completely slim building, you can also see that it essentially is a slab building that turns the corner, and that's a parking garage hiding behind the ivy. It's pretty much of a Rubik's Cube site. It's not a very big site. It's only about 125 or 30 feet square. And we have to pack in, obviously, the drop-off, the access, the lobby, although the lobby is really very small here, and back of the house for a restaurant and public space connected to that. So it's really a dense machine, branded as a kind of boutique hotel. You get dropped off on the left, go into this portal, and as I'll show you, you go up to the 5th floor. This is a hexagonal ceramic tile first floor, and these are columns designed, clad by Jim Iserman, who we worked with in 2002 at LAI Works. So making the geometry of this relative to the size of the tile, it's a 4-inch hexagonal tile. Sorry, the texture map wasn't ours, but it's gives you an indication of what the problem would be about all of these different kinds of conic surfaces to be able to skin it. The parking garage hides behind the rooms along the urban edge. The parking garage does peek out a little bit on the north, but otherwise that's the main ambition to the project, as opposed to having a parking garage that articulates the hardware and the machinery of urban circulation in LA and then stacking a building on top. We're able to kind of sleeve it together. There are the hotel rooms, then it turns into a double-loaded corridor here. Parking garage, 1st floor, and the 5th floor, which is the public space to the hotel. Here's some of the reflected ceiling plan drawings of the tile soffit, where the the tiling not only of the individual tiles, but also breaking down the kind of quilting of areas where we've got to create control joints, because things are moving geometrically in very, very odd ways. This has actually been the most challenging part of building the set of drawings. Here's the west facade. Lots of scooping, lots of serrating, lots of edginess on the one hand to the project. I would call it more nervous kinds of form making than, in some ways, the elegant kinds of form making maybe that we've been known for on the one hand. So you can see here the back of the hotel, which turns from metal panel to white plaster and also becomes serrated in the back. Generally, our projects have 5% or less of any kind of curving panel, and in this case, the panels are only cylindrically curved. None of them are conically curved, so we discipline the project down to that to be able to do things like turn the corner with the metal panel in a kind of clean way. And there's the back of the site with the hotel hovering above the parking garage. Now on Sycamore, where we're looking, this is also going to get built out. So this won't really look like this for very long. A number of units, long-term apartment units that we designed are in one wing of the building, and then it otherwise morphs into the double-loaded corridor. And the top floor has a public bar. So you can see the relationship of the grid of the site, the grid to the city, and the grid to the building itself, and then the ways in which the perimeter is working both with it and against it all at the same time. So I would say the building is this trying to be like HL23, the merger between the project that stands out and fits in to the orthographic aspect of the grid. The last project is I think an important one for us, and also one we've been working on for a long time. It's in Vancouver. Vancouver in the 70s looked like this, and from the 80s until today, it looks like this. Really, with the mushrooming of high-rise condominium. The 100-meter tower is about the main staple of zoning in Vancouver. Except for new projects done today, Big is doing a project and so forth. They were like snowflakes, I called these towers. Slightly different, all the same, generally with green glass and white spandrels made out of window wall system. A kind of high-level mediocrity that would build the city. In the meantime, the beautiful landscape around it is so captivating. So by 7-8 years ago, some developers said we'd like to move past this, especially with the success of projects in the 2000s in New York. Our client, Reliance Properties, owns this entire block. They're building this project now. It's by a local architect called IBI. We're doing this project here. This is a condominium, 35 stories, unaffected by zoning oddities, and I'm not going to show you that project tonight. It's a metal panel and glass curtain wall project, and I want to talk about this masonry project, which is, as you can see, deeply affected by the conditions of the city. The massing of the project is, in many respects, this combination between the found aspect of the grid of the city, obviously as referenced most deeply in the middle part of the project. This is a bit like HL23, promiscuity at the bottom, normative in the middle, and then oddities at the top, all based on not the fantasy of the architect, but the relationship of, let's say, an overall ambition of architectural work, not based on promiscuity or hubris, but also connected deeply to the strange conditions of the city. In this particular case, this project completely conforms to the zoning, the height of which is 100 meters. It produces a weird building, and it produces, I would say, at the end of the day, pretty weird and kind of funky. Here's the program. It's a mixed-use project. There's an office building, residential amenity spaces, and different types of typologies. They're all micro units in the building, so we're building out the entire interior of the project like Swiss Army knives with Murphy beds, etc. The building doesn't actually quite reach the ground on the one hand, so it takes high modernism pretty far. Let's say its profile at the bottom of the building, though, isn't uniform. It's incredibly varied. It does touch the ground on the alley side, but shifts up differently around the ground floor. And you can see that the grid of the housing units just tracks down however it can, but everything else as an interstitial moment is really an explicit sort of tension between the anxiety of building in the city, the possibility of making a certain kind of formal project, and letting those two things move and oscillate together. Here, this is the south elevation. One primary thing we're doing here, and this goes back to the level of postmodernism that's operating, here's a giant window and a series of perforated windows all connected just to a vast open interior. So yes, we're playing games with the skin, and the main reason why we're doing that is so that, sorry to go back, I hate doing that, so that the form of the building can actually scoop out and change the relationship between the horizontal nature of the plinth and the vertical nature of the shaft. It's a 3D graphic move, not sponsored by the program, sponsored by our own ambition to talk about the anxiety of being forced to work with the urban grid. It's a hybrid program project. It's a center core, and it morphs as it goes up programmatically. There's an office building that moves entirely through the site, a void for the retail space, and units that track on either side of the project. So it's being filled in and poured in programmatically into the envelope of the project. There's a detail looking. It's white brick and precast, beveling and sloping in the project all over the place, and I'll explain why it does that. So at the top, this is sliced off so that there's no shadow cast on this one little corner park. We actually have done another scheme for this project where the client asked us not to agree to the setbacks. We cast shadows on the park. The client thought that they had more political currency. They didn't. We were sent back. That started in 2013. And now it's a much more benign project. Yet at the same time, the form produces this crazy oddity because it's also sliced off. There are 23 view cones in Vancouver where you've got to get the mass out of a cone so that you can see a natural feature beyond. So I did not sketch out this top. I would never sketch this top out. I would never open my notebook and go, what's the problem of the top of a high-rise? Let me sketch something out. I would never do that. And yet, the fact that this is found and replicates the idea that we know that everybody's going to walk down the streets going, damn architects, just trying to... That doesn't bother me. I mean, it doesn't bother me that there's that dissonance between what the public opinion might be and what I might tell a few friends about the development of the project. The 7th floor connects to terrace space, and then it gets into the hardcore middle of the building. And where the building starts to step back, the fire stair has to jump to the other side of the building and track up this side, and then the elevators continue all the way up to allow this thin part of the project to be serviced. So the elevator continues on up, but the stair core comes up and shifts over to the back side of the project, and you get these strange terraces with the beveling of the form of the building. And there's the top penthouse. And the backside. These are all blind panels because this is where the stair is, and then it turns into mechanical up here. I'm going to wrap it up. I think I don't want to overstay my welcome, but thank you so much for listening to this. Thank you so much for your interest in our work and the honor for teaching here. Thank you so much.